Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Kate Sanka speaking. I'm the executive director here at Teach Access. I have a couple slides of information to share up front just to help you orient to the space. And then I will turn it over to our wonderful panelists and moderator. Um, Welcome to the 2026 Student Teach Access Student Academy. If you've been with us all day, thank you for sticking with us. If you're just joining, welcome. And if you're watching this recording at another time, we're so glad you're taking the time to do that. Um, just to help you understand what's available to you in this live session, we are committed to making this event as accessible as possible. Some things that are already active for you. We do have closed captions through CART. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a small square with CC inside of it. If you click that, you can access the captions. We also have ASL interpreters today. We do have them spotlighted, which means you will see them through the entire presentation. This is so that when we have the recording later, that will show up and not be in a separate window. But if there's anything else we can do throughout the session, please send us a message. Not to the full chat, we have that turned off just to help people focus, but you can send a message to the host and panelists, and someone will be able to help you. So, how to engage in this session? You're welcome to put messages into the chat that would go to us that we can pass to the panelists. You are very much encouraged to ask questions. You can put that into the Q&A box, which is also along the bottom of your screen, and the panelists will get to those later. We invite you to take notes or don't take notes, whatever makes sense for you to engage with the conversation today, because quiet listening also counts. So if you are just someone who likes to have the input and think about it later, please do that. And then, as always, we want this to be as comfortable as possible for you. So feel free to step away, to stretch, to move, take breaks as you need so that the space can feel comfortable for you. And then last but not least, before I turn it over, of course, we must thank our sponsors today, without whom it wouldn't be possible for us to provide this academy to you at no cost. So we want to give a thank you to Microsoft, to ADP, to Google, Meta, Salesforce, and Skyscanner. So a big thank you to all of them for making it possible today. Going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm thrilled to introduce Reginae Gilbert. She is a phenomenal researcher, educator, practitioner. She works in inclusive design and thinking about how to make spaces more inclusive and accessible to folks. She is also one of our Teach Access Board of Directors members, which means we get to work together often, and I love that. And she will be moderating this panel today, which is an all-star panel. I know it's going to be great. So with that, Reginae, I'm going to turn it to you to introduce everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you to everyone behind the scenes. So today I'm really excited to be the moderator for this panel, and I'm going to start off by introducing Kaush. Kaush Ganesh is a lead UX researcher specializing in human-centered research at the intersection of accessibility, security, and AI, with a background spanning academic research on inclusive design, a past career in tech marketing, and an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. She brings a multidisciplinary perspective to her work. Kosh enjoys coaching emerging researchers and helping them navigate the field. When she's not engaged in research, you'll find her walking her dogs, love dogs, or immersed in a podcast or audiobook. And next is Kavana. Kavana Ramesh is a UX researcher with over 4 years experience specialized in inclusive research for accessibility and inclusive design. She has facilitated over 500 hours of research sessions with people with disabilities and those who use assistive technology. She advocates for designers and researchers who support building technology and products to include a wide range of users in their testing to ensure that experiences are built to work well and be truly inclusive. So it's really great to be here with the both of you today. I'm so honored. And to get us started, could each of you just introduce yourselves and tell us where you are now and how UX research fits into your organization?
This is Kosh. Thank you, Rajani. That was a wonderful introduction. To add some more context to what I do, I also built and operationalized an accessibility research program within the Cisco security organization, and that with the main intent of leveling up our customer-facing teams in inclusive design research. And that's the expertise I'm trying to bring in today, and hopefully I can answer some of the questions that come through. Some of the things that we do as part of Cisco security involve making designs inclusive for the most technical users, like a network engineer, a security analyst. But we also have to make sure that the end users, someone who's non-technical, someone who's new to technology or isn't usually using technology, even they are able to secure themselves. They are able to use multi-factor authentication. They are able to get into the different interfaces without having to go through multiple roadblocks. That's where my role comes in, and thinking about how that fits into security and AI is where I'm supporting my team.
Thank you. Kavana.
Thanks so much. Thank you for the introduction. I think the lens that I think and the expertise I would say I bring here is really regarding kind of the practical um, how to of really trying to adapt methodologies and practices that come from maybe some of the disciplines that have typically not included people with disabilities, but how to actually sort of adapt and shape your approach not only to the methods you take, but also when you're actually facilitating any sort of research activities or engagements that are meant to bring a wide range of users, people with disabilities, to other marginalized groups, and figure out how you're actually going to shape and transform some of what you already might have as a skill set in your disciplines, if that's design, if that's research, if that's some other disciplines that you have sort of expertise in. How do you take what you use already and sort of transform that and leverage it to really include groups of people that typically don't get included? I think a lot of the work that I was doing over the past 3 years was mainly focused on kind of doing that first sort of like round of really true like accessibility research with people with disabilities, specifically assistive technology users. Um, and actually doing that and sort of bringing that forward using that UXR approach for a lot of kind of companies that don't necessarily know that they can just sort of like use the skills they have. They kind of would hire and consult someone like myself to support that. And I think my 2 cents is that I don't want you to have to hire someone who's confident in doing it. I want you to feel confident in doing it. And so the sort of hope I have is that by coming to more things like this and sharing that story, I can empower more people to get involved who don't maybe feel like they have the knowledge right now. But um, I want to encourage that. So that's definitely where I come from.
Thank you. That's such a great mission to have to get more people so you don't have to be there. We do have an additional panelist here, so I'm so excited. Katie Wainwright is able to join us. I'm just going to do a brief intro of Katie. Katie Wainwright, Dr. Katie Wainwright, PhD, is a UX researcher at Google with over a decade of experience building products and services for people with disabilities. After leading accessibility and system UI research strategies at Chrome OS, she joined a company-wide accessibility team where she has spent the last 5 years advancing inclusive usability across the Google ecosystem. Katie currently leads two cross-Google research programs, Accessibility Internationalization, which works in tandem to ensure products are built for everyone, everywhere. So, welcome, Katie. I'm going to extend this question to you. Could you introduce yourself a bit and and how UX research fits into your organization's approach to accessibility.
Yeah, hello. So excited to be here. I am Katie. I have been thinking about accessibility research at Google for a long time, holistically. My whole mission is to run around to different Google product teams and say, hey, your product's not very accessible, but I have a team of researchers and we can help you fix it if you pinky promise that you will go make progress on the things that we say need a little bit of help. And we have a really lovely team of researchers that I lead that go and do that research because for a variety of reasons, people feel really intimidated or overwhelmed by thinking about what is accessibility. How do I even approach someone with a disability? What language do I use so that I don't offend them, right? People get intimidated by even that level of stuff. And so we try to bring expertise to say, hey, we promise this is just regular research, just a little bit more that you need to know. It's not so hard, but we'll help you and we'll do this because we have experts who really understand assistive technology really strongly. We'll do this research with you. We'll help you to resolve these issues. And then we also, that gives us all this data to take a step back and say, oh, what are the things that maybe Google needs some help on to create standards or best practices across all these teams so that people can then be unblocked and make a better user experience for everybody, which is really great. And then we also do a lot of infrastructure, I think, to the previous points of like, how do we help make sure other people feel empowered to do this work so that it's not my team are the only experts at this whole company. We're building lots of little folks with different expertise across the whole company within their own product so that they can be a champion for this work as well. And it's not just us saying, hey, come on, let's do this. It's really like, hey, let's do this together and we'll help ramp you up and get you feeling good about how to do this type of work.
Thank you so much. I love that. So we have you folks are from different companies. We got Google, Cisco, and Lululemon. I mean, we couldn't get more different than these three companies, right? So because you all have different products and different audiences, how do you make the case internally for doing UX research for people with disabilities? And whoever would like to go first.
This is Kosh. I just came off mute, so I thought I should start. Really appreciate all of the points that Kavana and Katie brought up because that's exactly how we want to think about it. How do we empower other teams, other people that are people facing, customer facing to do the work? So, very excited to hear that we're all on the same page about that. So, to answer your question, to advocate particularly for UX research with people with disabilities, I like to stress on the importance of accessibility in security products because that's my space. These products, like I said before, serve a diverse range of users, not just in terms of technical expertise, but I also want to add the context of their environment. You know, some people are in hospitals, some people are in coal mines, labs, etc. And when products are inaccessible, it not only creates hurdles for the people that are trying to use them, it also creates risks for the organization. You know, we want to have them think about how do we make sure the users can do what they need to do, but also how does organizational information remain protected? So if we don't design usable products, users might resort to insecure workarounds, exposing the organization to vulnerabilities. And so the case to be made is that incorporating insights from people with disabilities is crucial not only for the idea of inclusivity, which is extremely important, and that's exactly why we're all here, but to make a business case, it's also important to ensure product security and effectiveness. And so by doing so, we can improve user experience. We're also reducing risk, and we're also building trust in all of our security solutions. That's how we think about that.
Thank you, Kash. Katie or Kavanaugh.
I'm happy to go, but also, Katie, if you want to jump in, no problem. Um, I think, I guess what I'll share is I think what's a little different for me, maybe compared to um, the other folks in this panel, just from like the gauging of what you both have shared, and thank you so much already for sharing that. But I think I'm a little bit more at that earlier phase where there is, sort of like a certain model for accessibility built into the ways of working in the organizational structure. And I'm kind of jumping in as a person with this expertise and the experience. A context that I'll add is that my previous role that I was in for the last 3 years was primarily doing UX research for accessibility for Fable, who has a platform of AT users from a wide kind of range, and also now cognitive disabilities and cognitive users. And actually, Lululemon happens to also be able to access that tool of Fable to test with these participants. And so it's kind of an interesting, weird thing where I was in that space where I was doing this every day and I was very bought in. And now I'm kind of outside of that bubble in an organization where they have the tools, they have the buy-in somewhat because they bought those tools to support kind of facilitating some of that user-centered approach to connecting with people with disabilities and actually engaging in them with them throughout their design of products and experiences, but they don't necessarily feel like we've already sort of touched on in some of the things that others have shared. They don't feel empowered and they do feel a little bit intimidated. Like there's a certain person with the expertise and they can hop onto this platform and meet with a person with a disability who uses a screen reader, and only they will be able to conduct research with them. And that there's this sort of mindset of like intimidation, hesitation. I'm not sure I know how. I'm not sure I have the tools or the know-how. And so I'm a bit working with just building that foundational like confidence over time by sort of putting images and videos and clips in front of people, getting them more familiar with assistive technology, getting to like see and touch and experience and start to feel less like this is a scary gray zone that they haven't really entered. And that's sort of the place that I'm working from, which is a little bit a little bit earlier in that journey that we would love to see that maturity of an accessibility practice go through, but provides its own challenge. And happy to speak more to that. But I'll pass it over to Katie.
Amazing. Love all of that. I think we try every angle that we possibly can in order to make sure accessibility gets prioritized at Google. We bake it into strategy. We go to leadership and tell them to push down. We go to the folks on the ground and we tell them to push up. And so truly every route that we can try to squeeze it in and say, hey, this is important. Hey, don't forget this is important. We try to take. And so to bake it into strategy, we actually successfully have had accessibility usability as a Google-wide OKR, or objective and key result, which is just like a company-wide goal that says certain teams of a certain size that have already thought a little bit about technical accessibility, so that my researchers aren't just saying, hey, go make sure you add alt text, right? Because we know people just should know to go add alt text, right? But like to really think about accessibility usability, we have an OKR that says some teams need to come work with us to make sure that they have considered this and that they've done research with actual users to make sure that their perspective is being accounted for. We also go to leadership and we talk to them about what is accessibility, what's the value, how can you help to advocate by telling your team, yes, this is important, we need to reach these goals together, making sure that they're resourced well, right? Part of having a Google-wide goal is not to just go say, hey, look, this team did really well or this team did really bad. It's to say, oh, this team struggled. What type of resources and support and leadership buy-in do they need in order to make this happen? So it's supposed to help facilitate those goals. We really try to balance this like empathy business case model, right? It's really, I think it's easy to get to kind of tell a story and want to lean on empathy. But then at the end of the day, if you are a business, you have to balance it with why should Google as a company care about this topic beyond just that story felt nice or it's good to unblock this group of people, right? Which does get you in the door, but it doesn't necessarily always close the deal with especially leadership. And so making sure that we're giving education and really leaning into the curb cut too to say, look, we've unblocked it for this huge group that extends beyond, right? Even things as simple as reminding people that we all used closed captions. It's not just for folks who are deaf or hard of hearing anymore. I have it turned on 100% of the time because like I eat snacks so loudly that I need to like listen, right? And so there's so many use cases for this work. And so the user is really much more broad than what you think of at first glance. And so doing that education, creating those guidebooks, but also baking in that empathy and that understanding is really our approach, which is, I know a lot, but we find we need all of those angles to be successful.
Thank you all. That's a good. I also have captions on all the time, for the record. Next question. UX research often blends big picture patterns with individual stories. How does your research help teams understand accessibility needs at scale without losing the nuance of personal experiences? I'll go with Kavana.
Sure. I think um, I think what I think is powerful about the UX research approach, or sort of the field at large, is that woven into how we communicate our findings is impact, right? And I think that one of the key ways that I think using that approach to frame recommendations and changes that are going to improve an experience for accessibility or for people with disabilities is that by kind of taking the approach of UXR, we can focus on the impact and often define an impact that, just because of the nature of just like I being a different type of person with different disabilities and different challenges, I'm not going to have the same, this issue will impact me differently than a person with low vision, or who uses a screen magnification device most, or like a tool most of the time. And so having these ways of framing anything that is working or not working within the system through the lens of individual impact, and even sometimes in the impact that's compounded over time, something that I feel like we talk about a lot in sort of the way that we think about disability, is that there's also that temporal piece. Sometimes something is not an issue until you have to do it 20 times, and now it's compounded into creating additional fatigue, additional strain, and is now not accessible to that person. And so I think one thing that I love about applying UX research methods and approaches to inclusive research, to the like accessibility at large, is that it's a really great way to take these things that often live in a technical space, a technical jargon of like, we need to fix these, specific interactions, or these specific labeling for button elements. We talk a lot about that, especially in accessibility. Sometimes it feels like, oh, that's someone's more technical job, and I think that's a very it's maybe an immature organizational perspective on accessibility. But I think that's what so many different companies and different people out there are dealing with when they try to bring that up to their leadership and get that buy-in. And so I think that's been my fascination, is in witnessing over time accessibility be framed in a UXR perspective with the impact at the center. I feel like I see people's minds like finally dig in and finally empathize with an experience that they just don't themselves have. And that just makes them that much more willing to jump and go and make the changes that are going to improve the experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Katie.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of different avenues to make this happen, to kind of blend that big picture and make sure people still focus on the stories and like what the individual experience is. A little bit of what I was saying, of like remind them of the curb cut, but then also show them stories, because it's so impactful, right? I think my cross-functional partners, who I love so dearly, tend to forget, though, that they're not building for themselves. They're building for a whole world of humans. And so like watching people struggle can be incredibly powerful, right? Because especially when you like talk to a software engineer whose whole job is to build this thing that they think is so cool and they're so immersed in, and they say, what do you mean users have a problem? And then they watch someone like with a screen reader try to go through their product and they go, oh my God, that's like horrific. And you're like, yes, please, let's fix it together. And so trying to make sure that we keep that like smaller narrative of this storytelling and the user experience really at the heart of this, to remind people this is why we're doing it. Your product is amazing. It can be even better if we try to address some of these things. And then really making sure that we stay zoomed out to say, I've asked you to go fix 30 different issues, and I'm so sorry. And I know that feels like intimidating, but let's look at like, what's the progress that's going to be made? How are we going to really unblock your product to have more users, like more revenue, like all of the downstream consequences of the things that you want. I want that too. And we can together help you get there, because you're missing this whole pocket of humans if you're not being thoughtful about how you design for them.
Thank you, Katie. Kosh.
Yeah, I really believe in the power of storytelling, and I come from a qualitative UX research background, so I resonated with everything Kavana and Katie had to say. When it comes to helping teams make sense of accessibility needs, I think of it as two main strategies. The first is when you start to plan a study, especially a design-heavy project, we make it a point to include at least 20% of our participants who identify as people with disabilities. And we use Fable, love Fable, huge fan. And that ensures we're getting a diverse range of perspectives right from the get-go. So we've set up the stage to create the story that we want to tell, right? And then second strategy is when I share my findings, I try to focus on how specific features or user flows perform in different contexts. For example, I might say something like feature Y needs an alternative login option for users who can interact with the screen, whether that's due to the nature of their work in a sterile environment, or perhaps it's related to a disability. And this followed by one or two user quotes or showing them a video, like Katie was saying, showing them how difficult it is for someone to use something, just tells the story in a way that resonates with stakeholders and helps them understand that the curb cut problem that was addressed before, accessibility benefits everyone. It's not just about a certain population. If we fix something for one population, we're going to impact and improve the experience for everyone. It's just about telling the story in a way that people can understand that this is not just about people who use screen readers. You're going to improve the experience for people in sterile environments. You're going to improve people's experience when they wear a mask and they're not able to use Face ID. How do we go towards that? I try to focus on those kinds of strategies.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all because things that benefit text messaging benefits all of us. And it was, it's one of those things that when you look back at the history of it, you learn a lot and how it's related to accessibility. So thank you all for those answers. Um, you all have a lot of research tools like surveys, interviews, focus groups, usability testing. How do you decide which methods make the most sense for accessibility focused projects?
Probably my turn to go first. Yes, tons of tools. And what we do when we go and we work with a team, we've tried to narrow it down so that it feels less intimidating for teams to approach accessibility research. And we say, hey, really part of our job is to facilitate the usability. And so that means we have a smaller subset of things that we need to work in. And that both makes it more approachable, but it also streamlines it so that we can scale it instead of saying, hey, we're going to do this custom solution for however many Google products there are. We can say, we give you 3 methods to pick from, and let's figure out where are you at in your accessibility journey and what method's going to be the best for you there. So if a team has never thought about accessibility usability before, we're just going to do a heuristic evaluation where we have somebody who's an expert in the assistive tech walk through the product and find issues. We find the low-hanging fruit. It doesn't take us very much time. They get really far ahead, right? Because we can solve some of the really big blockers that they might not have known about. But then there's some teams who are like, hey, we've been doing this for years. We get it. Like, let's see the nuance. Let's hear what the users are saying. And or we need that video. We need to watch them like struggle in order to be willing to do something, right? We used to have some teams like that are just like, you can tell me that your expert said this was an issue and I'm not going to believe it until a user talks to me. And so we really make sure that we understand, who are we working with, what's the team, what do they need to see in order to feel motivated to get going, and then that's how we choose the method within that set of methods. And then when we are able to zoom out to say like, hey, we need to solve like this standard, or we need a better best practice to help all teams at Google, then we have a much more diverse range of solutions or methods that we can implement at that point to make sure that we're addressing what we need in the same way that any researcher would choose, how do you pick the best method for this particular moment.
Thank you, Katie. Kosh or Kavana?
Amazing. Okay,
Kosh.
so yes, this is Kosh. We try to avoid doing accessibility focused projects for the most part, just because of the way we're set up on the team. So my strategy instead has been, how can we use the accessibility research program that we have to create champions across design and development teams? Because we don't have an accessibility team at this stage. So when we think about it that way, teams start to plan any sort of a design project, any sort of a research project, we want to have people in the room who can shape the plan to include diverse perspectives. So we've successfully done a variety of methods, including usability tests in live environments, in-depth interviews when we're starting to think about some new concepts, some very foundational research. And we've also done some prototype walkthroughs for some scenarios that we're addressing. But it's been really interesting to see how different people champion accessibility in their even in their language, right? When designers go into the room and talk about it, they speak about it from the point of view of we want to make sure we reduce the number of clicks. We want to make sure we don't show people too many things at the same time. And they talk about it from a very UI focused point of view. Whereas when you talk to the development team, it's interesting to hear them speak in like a very technical language. And so it's very important that we, as accessibility champions, think about how to address these problems and generalize it so that it's easy for someone to champion the reason why we need to be inclusive instead of getting really into the details of how we're going to do something or how we're going to solve the problem. And that's why we have these champions in the room. You know, anytime someone goes way too deep and starts to say, this is too much, we don't think we can prioritize this is not P0. We go, wait a second, what do you think the goal of this security product is? Do we want everyone to be able to use it, or do we want some people to end up dealing with problems and therefore we have us having to pull back a feature? What would you prefer? And when we start to have that kind of a conversation, it just really helps set the stage for what research can and cannot do.
Thank you, Kash. Kavana?
Thanks so much. Kavana here, but I think there's so many interesting threads from what both of you shared, but maybe I'll just add something sort of kind of coming at this from a different side, is sort of like I think one of the things that I feel like has been really like has kind of enabled me to encourage and build that confidence that we kind of have talked about around applying some of your methods that you might have in your toolkit is by recognizing that there are adaptations that you're going to make whatever method you've chosen maybe actually be set up in a way to enable your users who could have a variety of disabilities, maybe they're assistive technology users, to make sure that they can engage with that method effectively. And so one of the reasons that I think this comes up a lot is I feel like even in the UXR and UX design space, there are a lot of tools that are really incredible tools that are so many researchers and designers are using, but are just not really set up to be a very like interactive environment for certain user groups, especially something like a Miro board that has a lot of visual components and is like this sort of infinite canvas. And there's a lot of different methods and tools and even like cool workshops that you can lead that are like all built into these incredible tools that a lot of practitioners are using, but just aren't set up in a way that to be as engageable for a different user. And so I think one of the ways I think about it is rather than like get caught up in like not get blocked by, oh, I've chosen a method, oh, I've chosen this method, it's the best method for the question or that the goal that I'm trying to tackle with my research. Oh, but I can't use this one tool that I have. Oh, but that tool's not going to be accessible to this person, so maybe I'm just not going to include them in this research. And that I think is like one of the reasons that we sort of see that fall off, especially touching on what Kaush said, like having oftentimes we don't necessarily get that bandwidth to do accessibility focused research. Maybe we are just trying to include some people into another study, and that feeling of like, oh, but I've designed this study perfectly to be this, and so I won't be able to include people with disabilities. That being a blocker is something that I've encountered so many times, and I think my answer to that very much is you have to be willing to pivot from what is your like perfect plan that you've created and recognize that yes, to pivot from it will lead to some trade-offs, but the trade-offs will still enable the voice of a user group that you are not hearing from, and any way that you can leverage empowering that voice to engage with your method any way at all is better than not at all. So I think that's what I would add. But yeah.
Just to add to it, that's a lovely point
Yeah.
to think about, like what are the restrictions and the ways that we can work within the confines, especially
Yeah.
try really hard at Google to push people to think about accessibility earlier, right? Like the analogy of if you bake a cake and then try to put the egg on at the end, like that's not going to work. Let's think about accessibility before we launch products. But then when designers come to us and say, I have this like Figma file, can you go get feedback? And it's like, well, screen readers and Figma files, that's just not going to work. So how do we train people and how do we adapt research to make sure that people get feedback when they need it, given the
Yeah.
kinds of what tools people tend to work with? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the timing and sort of that process is so critical. 100% appreciate that point. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you all made it clear that context is key when it comes to the types of tools that are needed. And you can't just be like, well, we did that in the past, so we're going to keep doing this thing, right, over and over. So thank you all for your answers. What are some things UX researchers commonly overlook when planning studies with disabled participants? And how can
Mm.
they set things up more thoughtfully from the beginning? Kosh?
Sure. I'm thinking about how to frame this, and perhaps it's going to be framed as suggestions instead of saying what's overlooked. So I want to say it's important to do this. So consider including a screener question or two about accommodations when you're planning the recruitment process. When you do that, it allows you to be proactive about your participants' needs, and it also signals to them that you are, willing to be prepared. If they need something more than what you're willing to offer, you know that in advance, and they know that you're willing to do that for them. And secondly, I think if you're planning a virtual study that involves asking participants to share their screens and things like that, a great practice that comes from UX research is running a pilot session. Do a session with someone internal to the team on the chosen platform so you can anticipate any technical difficulties that you may encounter. And this could look like a last minute software update, something that's preventing, say, a Mac from screen sharing, or there might be some permissions that need to be given, so you need to reboot the whole system. You may want to do that ahead of time, so when it happens during your session, you know exactly where to tell your participant to focus. If in the absence of that, you're just trying to get something done, and it not only is time consuming for the person who's agreed to be a part of your study, it's also time consuming for the team that is willing to spend that time looking for feedback. So those are the two things I would say are really important considerations.
Thank you. Katie?
Yeah. Following up on that, I agree. I think researchers tend to get really comfortable with the tools that we use as well. And so, like, even just we do a lot of usability sessions over Google's video platform, and like every Google researcher knows where the share screen button is, but they need to be prepared to like make sure that a screen reader user knows how to navigate and find the share screen button so that they can show us what they're doing. And so, being prepared with things like that. I think also the language and just how easy it is to like have these sessions with people, right? I think that's something that people, I said, tend to get hooked up on, but reminding people that like folks with disabilities want their voices heard. They want to be able to tell us what they like and don't like about our product. And so having less fear around just starting that engagement, and that yes, we want to make sure we're being thoughtful and don't offend anyone by accidentally using language that's like out of date or not appropriate, but that like truly people want the opportunity more than they want to make sure that you're like being so precise with your language, like to not offend them, right? And then the other thing is co-occurrences of disabilities, and I've fallen into this too as like an overlooked area. I remember going into my very first one that I thought I was prepared for because I was studying Switch access for Chromebooks. And I went in thinking, great, this is a Switch user. I know Switch. This is great. I can do this. And they also used a screen reader. And I went, oh my God, I did not think about the fact that this person could be using multiple assistive technologies. And now I feel thrown off. And I was a baby researcher at the time, and I was obviously so flustered. And so just thinking about how do you actually prepare for what's ahead of you, which can be tricky, right? Of balancing that with telling people, hey, this is not actually so hard, but then like also let's make sure we're prepared for how do we interact with folks and their unique needs, because everybody's needs and tools are going to be different.
Thank you. Kavana?
I'll just wrap up some things that I really appreciate that you both shared there. I think it's really interesting, like that. Like, I think one of the biggest things that's overlooked is that it doesn't have to be so hard and that it could be this easy. I totally hear you on that, Katie, as well. And I think along with that is kind of something that I really lean on is it doesn't have to be so hard. And when you're working with somebody that you have brought into a session who has a particular set of tools that they're using, maybe co-occurrent disabilities, different AT setup that they might leverage, I'll ask them what is their, what are like the tools, the AT setup, the assistive technology that you might be using? Would you walk me through that? Take me through what you're using. Maybe I even ask them for a quick demo of them just navigating a basic page like The Guardian and just go, hey, could you just show me how you typically navigate a page? And then the onus is no longer on me to be the researcher, like power expert person, but instead it's, oh, this person is the expert on their tools, their disability, their accommodations that they need, and what works for them and what doesn't. And I'm just here to learn from them. And that's the mindset that I'm going to go in with. So I just think that that's a really easy solve for the, I don't know, I think I can't do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're running short on time, so I'm going to ask one last question. So I'll just ask, my students are watching. So for the students out there who are working on class projects or their early, research experience, what's one accessibility focused research practice they can start right away? Ooh. Katie.
I really love the approach that we've talked about already of like, how do you integrate it into your work without it having to say like, okay, I'm going to set aside extra time to go do this accessibility research that is this other thing and it's a different work stream from all my other work. But how do you bake it in and how do you make it integrated? And how do you think about what's that perspective, whether it's one user in a broader group or different needs that you reflect in? And even if you can't bring folks in to be thinking of that, how do you put yourself in the shoes of like, okay, if I'm using magnification, if I'm using different tools, what does my product look like? What does this experience look like? How do I interact with things to make sure that we're just being thoughtful of the fact that everybody uses different tools and has different perspectives and needs?
Thank you, Katie. Gosh.
My favorite piece of advice is to practice inclusion in different scenarios, even when you're not doing research. And what I mean by that is when you're about to start or stop sharing your screen in a virtual setting, always give the audience a few seconds before taking that action. As you saw at the beginning of this panel, there was a moment given for everyone to orient to the fact that the screen is about to be stopped. And it's really important to do that and practice that. And also thinking about another example, when you're using an infinite canvas, like Kavana was saying before, a Miro board, or maybe a Figma workspace, make sure you inform others before you move the view to a different section, because sometimes we tend to scroll at the speed of our thought, and that can cause dizziness for other people that are watching. So when your screen is shared and you're trying to move, always give people a heads up. And these are just like really little ways in which you can practice inclusion before getting into an actual UX research scenario.
Thank you, Kavana.
I love everything that you both have shared. I'll just say, I think if I was to give, if I picture myself as a student when I was really excited about this work and I didn't know where to get started, I think the first thing I would say is that you don't have to get started in any specific way or perfect way. You can try to go and get more information, try to interact in spaces where you can learn from other people who maybe have that lived experience and can talk about it with you and just a sponge, be open to the fact that we're coming into this space with a ton of bias and world machinery that has been imparted on us and we're always trying to dismantle it. So just know that you're not doing anything wrong by trying it in whatever shape and form that it takes.
I love that. A lot
Yeah.
of folks on my team come to me and say, oh, I'm not an expert. What do you mean I need to go tell teams what to do? And I say, you know what a screen reader is. You already know more than them. And so like you
Yeah,
already are an advocate who can help push this forward.
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I love that.
Thank you. And thank you all for your insights and For everyone here, I think that the real thing that anyone can do is begin anywhere. I have that as a phrase. And I think that if you have an interest in making things more inclusive and accessible, begin anywhere. It doesn't matter. Just start. And so thank you all for your time so much. And thank you, Teach Access, and again, everyone behind the scenes and everyone watching.
Yay, everyone. This is Kate Sanka speaking. I just want to offer a huge, enormous thank you to all of you. You were incredible. I was getting a lot of good feedback behind the scenes of the conversation and people being excited. So thank you, everyone, for making time today to join us. And hello to all of Regene's students who are paying attention and all the students who are here with us. We are going to take another quick pause of about 15 minutes, and then we have something that I think will be very useful for all of you out there. It's a fireside chat, and it will be talking about emerging accessibility professionals. What does that look like? What does it mean to start working in this field? Some of which this panel was just kind of exploring a little bit. So we invite you to join us for that one, and we will see you in a few minutes. So again, thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. But join us for the next session. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.